This is part of the Kessler songwriter thing. We're going to ask Billy Joe a few questions, and then he'll come back and do a couple more songs.
We don't try.
I'm deaf. I'm as deaf as you are, Billy Joe. Anyway, I'm Mark Mundy with KNON Radio, Texas Renegade Radio, 89.3 FM in Dallas. And I know there's a lot of supporters of our radio station here tonight. And guys like Billy Joe Shaver and Donnie Ray Ford have been gracious enough to do benefits to help us raise money because we're a listener-supported radio and we're always broke. But we got our 28th anniversary coming up next month, and we've been playing Billy Joe Shaver for 28 years. So that's pretty good. I don't think there's another radio station in town that can say they've had the same format for 28 years at the same time, but we have. And so if you want to listen to Billy Joe, tune in Monday through Friday, 4 to 6.
Thank you, folks.
Anyway, Billy Joe. So you grew up in Corsicana in the 1950s, and you had an English teacher named Mrs. Legg.
That wasn't in Corsicana, though.
Well, it was outside of Corsicana.
Well, I lived in Corsicana until I was 12, and then I moved to Waco at Belle Meade, La Vega. She was a high school teacher. Her name was Ms. Legg, and she'd come down to the 8th grade. I didn't get past the 8th grade, but she'd come down to 8th grade, and she, different from the other teachers, she would always make us do something. Had a whole hour chunking stuff and things, but she wouldn't let us do that. She'd give us some kind of work to do, and she gave me this. Said write a poem, you know. So I wrote this poem. I didn't think much about it because I'd been writing since I, could talk. And she come back. She said, "Where'd you get this?" And I was one of the guys that rolled his cigarettes up his sleeve and all that stuff. and I said, "Well, I got it on my head, you know." She said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you one to write." And she gave me this thing. She said, "Write something about space." So I just wrote one. I went and bared down. I wrote one that curled her toenails, you know. And she came back and told me, of course, that I was great. I already knew it. and I went into the Navy. I told her, I said, "I'm going into the Navy because I'm in so much trouble around here." And she said, "Oh, no, you got to stay. You got to go with me." I said, "No, I really need to go in the Navy." My stepfather and I didn't get along, and she said, "Okay, you're right. You go live some." I said, "All right." So I did, and that's what helped me, encouraged me to be more a songwriter than anything, because I'd been doing it all my life. I guess I was born to do it. And if she hadn't said something to me, though, more than likely I'd still be wherever I cut my fingers off.
But who is Bubba Shaver?
That's me.
But why were you using the name Bubba?
Because my sister, she's trying to say brother, and she said, "Boo."
Well, that leads me to another question. Before you became a professional songwriter, I use that loosely.
I still ain't a professional.
What kind of jobs were you doing? Starting with the Navy, then after the Navy, what?
After the Navy, I cowboyed around a lot. I married a girl that they had a big old farm, I guess you call it a ranch, I don't know. But we'd break horses. We'd buy them at sales and break them out of their bad habits and then keep turning them. And I was the one that always had to do the work. And it was a peach orchard we had, and sand was that deep, and I'd take them out there and just wire them out, man, and get them out of their habits. Except this one big old Tennessee walking horse, son of a gun jumped up in a peach tree with me. and I'm not kidding you, we had to cut him out. We had to get a saw and cut him out. And I was lucky to get out of there. I never got on one that tall again. And you had to have a step ladder to get on it, but he was strong too. But he got hung in a tree.
Okay, well, let's move on then. Right. Since we're putting about 20 minutes into 10, since we're at the end of the show, we probably should have done this a little bit earlier, but that leads me to something that I just forgot to ask you. you're a legendary songwriter, a legendary performer, and some of your lifestyle is legendary over the years.
Well, yeah, that stuff, you know, I didn't do that.
But some of the
I did it, but it just happened.
Some of the stories are at cult status now, and so we debate them whether they're true or not. So I'd like you to set the record straight on 2 or 3 of the stories.
All right, tell me.
Okay, the first one I'd like to know about is Waylon Jennings did an entire record in 1973, Honky Tonk Heroes, of all your songs.
Yeah.
Okay. It's my understanding that record almost didn't get recorded. So if you could take us back to Willie's reunion in 1972, I think, where you met Waylon, and then it started.
Before then.
Well, I know, but I mean, I'm talking about the record. How did that record get made?
Well, Waylon, I was at the first 4th of July thing was called the Dripping Springs Reunion. Sound like a venereal disease. Anyway, I wasn't trying to be funny, I'm just saying. Waylon heard me playing Willie the Wandering Gypsy to me in this little trailer, and he come busting out of the back there, and he says, "Is that your song?" I said, "Yeah, it sure is." And he said, "Well, you got any more of them Cowboy songs?" I said, "Sure, you know, I was Cowboy then." I said, "Yeah, I got a whole sack full of them." He said, "Well, come up to Nashville, I'll do a whole album." And I kind of always did hold the guy to his word, you know. He gave his word, shook hands with me, and all that stuff. I went up there and run after him for about 6 months and got sick of it. And he was in the recording studio there, and the hallway was lined with groupies and hangers-on and motorcycle guys and stuff like that. And he was up there in the control room, and Captain Midnight, this disc jockey, he let me in, and I wasn't supposed to be in there because Waylon gave him specific orders not to let me in around him. And because I dogged him, man, you know, and I was going to get it done. And anyway, he sent Captain Midnight back with a $100 bill, and it's all rolled up into a little bitty square. And he just told, he said, Waylon said, take this and get along. And I told him where to stick it, you know. And he went back and told Waylon. Waylon comes out of the control room all mad and everything. Got all these bikers on the side of him. And I told him I was going to whip his ass if he didn't at least listen. And that's how I got started, really. And sure enough, he said, well, he did. He kind of tickled him, I guess. Those guys were fixing to come and get me. And he stopped them, and he took me in this room, and he said, I'm going to tell you what, man, you don't do things like that, you get killed. And I said, well, I'm down to it, you know, I don't care. And so he said, just play me one song, and if I don't like it, you hit the door, and I'll never see you again. That's the end of it. So I did. I played him, I think it was Black Rose, Devil Made It that first time. And he said, okay. He said, let me hear another. And I kept going, and every time he'd say, let me hear another. And I by the time I got to Honky Tonk Heroes and Old Five and Dimers and stuff like that, he said, now I know what I got to do. And he went in there and turned the whole darn thing around, brought his band in, and recorded my songs. And I actually had to go out there and sing them. And he had to come and overdub them because his phrasing was a little bit different than mine. But he got into it after a while, and I believe that's where we both growed up. You know, them songs was bigger than I was. I couldn't possibly sing them as good as Waylon ever.
Well, that was a hit. That was the start of this outlaw movement, and that was the first time that anyone used the road band.
That. I wasn't no outlaw.
Yeah.
In-law.
The great progressive scare. The second story I have, I heard has to do with your first record deal, and it has to do with somebody that was holding a president of a record company by their ankles on the 3rd floor balcony, upside down, and tell us.
There's stuff you got to do to get a record deal.
But you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's what it was working. You know, everything worked. And, I no gripes about it. It just happened. You know, there's no plan. I have never had a plan my whole life. I don't even know where I'm going after this. Going back to wacko, I guess.
So was that you?
Well, of course it was.
Okay, I just
Who else is good? I was pretty strong then.
The third story I'd like to know is, who is the other songwriter that you rode your motorcycle up their steps and into their front door and declared that you were the greatest songwriter in the world?
Yeah, you know, I didn't know that guy was that big. I borrowed a motorcycle. It wasn't my motorcycle, but I borrowed one. I run up on his porch. They had houses, you know, and they'd make them into publishing companies. And it was Big Harland music. And I had no idea what the Big Harland meant. Harland Howard, he'd written Busted and all that kind of stuff, and all that Buck Owens things and all them things, and Tiger by the Tail and all that. And I assumed that he was the best in that town, you know, till I got there. And I said, so I rolled up on the door, hit his door. He come out, man, he's a big old guy. And I said, hey, he said, what are you doing, boy? And I said, I was just going to tell you I'm the greatest songwriter ever lived. And he said, because I was getting a little bit weary, you know, getting a little bit shaky. And he said, well, I thought I was. And I said, no, you're not anymore. And a little bit, not like my other stuff. And he said, come on in. And he had some whiskey and thing. We got drunk and got real good friends. And we kind of, he loaned me a guitar. And I wrote this whole album of songs. This little bitty, one of the little Martins. And when I got done, I took the album and he was at this place, Brown's Diner. They sold chili and stuff like that. And he was sitting there, and I come by and I handed him the album. And he, I guess, took it home. And 2 days later, he said, I want my guitar back. So, yeah. But he and Tom T. Hall always believed that you could shake songs out of guitar. You know, I never believed that. But I guess I did shake a few out of that.
We'll bring it back. I have 2 more questions in. We'll get back. We'll get back to the music.
Excuse me, folks. I'm sorry. I was just
Robert Duvall. You were in his movie The Apostle, and you guys have a long-standing friendship. His wife, his girlfriend, did a documentary on it.
Yeah.
Tell us about how your friendship with him developed, and what do you think of his version of "Live Forever" in Crazy Heart?
Yeah. Well, it was down there, real honest and all that, but it was a tag on. He made them go back in. I called him up and told him they'd push me out. Some reason or another, them people got where they wouldn't let me in on nothing. And right now, they ain't letting me in on much of nothing, so I'm having to do this album by myself. More than likely, I'll be a multi-mode out of this or that, and big old genius and everything like that, because they pushed me into it. They did. And so I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do something about it, and I'm going to go ahead and put this album out and just show them how the cow eats the cabbage, you know. That's... I got to talking so much I forgot what you asked me. How
did you and Robert Duvall get together? Because you've been in his movies?
He was a big fan of my music. And he came to Austin, and he was doing part of Lonesome Dove at the time. And I didn't know him. And there was a guy there at the blues bar. And
Clifford Antone.
Yeah, they booked me into the blues bar, but Clifford was raising hell about it, and they called me and said, John, it's off. You know, Clifford said, you ain't having a damn cowboy in here. You know, because he had no idea how good we were. And, but then Robert Duvall calls him up and says, well, I want that boy in there at 11 o'clock, and blah, blah, blah. You know, Robert always gets his way. But I said, I don't know what. He may have some connections of some sort. I don't know. But anyhow, at 11 o'clock we come in there, and Eddie was up there playing, you know, and he played a big old boogie amp, and I mean, just blasting everybody. And I was singing, and Robert came up, and Clifford Antone, when he first heard the first song, all of a sudden he got up there and sat on Eddie's amp all night long. And he and Eddie got together, and he was going to manage him and make another Stevie Ray Vaughan type thing with him. And I said, well, lost my guitar player. But anyway, Robert said, Billy, said, you're the best. I said, I know I am. And he looked at me real funny, and he says, no, I mean, you're the best. I said, okay. And he says, I said, well, Waylon is the best because he's the one that sung the songs. He said, no, he said, you're the best because you wrote it. And I said, well, maybe you're right. I'm real bashful and shy.
Last question.
I'm humble.
Last question. You played probably the best concert halls around the world, and probably some pretty humble halls.
Yes.
On I remember December 12th, 1998, I went down to see you at the Tokyo store.
Oh my God.
It was a rumor that you were playing down there, and you were playing for some friends. James Hand played. Bimbo, James Hand's brother, who I think's a bookie in Waco.
Bimbo, when you get like that, his girlfriend would shoot Roman candles through his leg and hit that propane tank is inside that store. And it just bounce off there. If it blow it up, it blows the whole town.
Tokyo is 4 miles west of
They
west.
spelled it wrong, too.
Yeah, and it's a shotgun shack. You played 3 full sets that night for 30 of us. It was awesome. What is the best gig you've ever had? And what is
church.
What is the worst gig you've ever had?
Church. Yeah, I had to give it up. I'm a born-again Christian. It's hard to believe, but I really am. I know that I talk kind of like I ain't very humble, but I really am. I'm not that humble, but I try. No, I think everybody ought to try to be like Jesus, if you could.
Amen.
And if you could be like him, man, you have made it.
All right. Well, I have a lot more questions, so maybe you come down to the radio station sometime.
Maybe
But
so.
right now, how about a couple more tunes from Billy Joe Shaver?